James McAllister arrived at the Hotel Pacifico with his usual expression, that of someone carrying the weight of the world's responsibilities on his shoulders. The successful businessman, owner of a luxury hotel chain, rarely allowed anything or anyone to disturb his focus. He was heading to his suite, where a crucial meeting awaited, but as always, the hotel's environment, with its charm and elegance, seemed just another backdrop to his daily obligations. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share it with your friends, leave a comment below, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this one. As he passed through the impeccably polished marble corridors, his attention was momentarily diverted by a simple yet intriguing figure. Sofia Martinez, the maid, walked discreetly, almost silently, going about her routine. Her perfectly arranged uniform contrasted with her distant gaze, as if carrying an invisible weight that went beyond the work she performed. It wasn't the first time James had seen her, but something felt different at that moment. She was there, present, yet somehow distant, as if she were part of the scenery, but didn't quite fit into it. James didn't pay much attention to the encounter. As always, his gaze was calculated, his actions focused only on what truly mattered. However, something went unnoticed in that moment. The fact that in this simple, improbable meeting, he was about to cross paths with someone who would change his life forever. The next morning brought a new scenario. James, exhausted from the meeting that had lasted into the late hours, entered his suite in search of a well-deserved rest. He expected nothing more than the usual tranquility of his luxurious room, but something surprised him. When he entered, Sofia was there, tidying up the room with a care he had never seen from any maid before. The way she attended to every detail seemed almost artistic, a full attention to even the smallest gestures, as if the environment were a reflection of her own soul. James paused for a moment, observing her discreetly. She didn't notice his presence, immersed in her work, until their eyes met. What should have been a simple glance from a guest to a staff member turned into a moment charged with something inexplicable. James, the man who always maintained control, felt a discomfort, something strange he couldn't identify. This woman, with her simple appearance and deep gaze, seemed to carry an energy he didn't know how to interpret. He quickly turned away, trying to ignore that discomfort, but the feeling that something more was there didn't disappear. Sofia, on the other hand, felt James' gaze, but quickly became distracted with her work. She didn't believe someone like him, a man so distant from her reality, would pay attention to her. But in that brief encounter, something in his manner made her question her own emotional barriers, as if he were, somehow, more accessible than he seemed. In the following days, James couldn't stop thinking about Sofia. It wasn't just her beauty that attracted him. There was something more, a sense of mystery and depth that he couldn't explain. She was different from all the women he had ever known. There was a quietness in her, a silence that seemed to speak more than words ever could. He tried to push these thoughts away, rationalizing that it was just a fleeting attraction, but he couldn't. Something in him, something deep and inexplicable, seemed to be in tune with something in her. Sofia, on the other hand, continued her routine with the same quiet dedication. She knew who James McAllister was, the hotel manager, the powerful, distant man. And with her life experience, she had learned not to be deceived by appearances or the shine of influential people. She knew how wide the distances between different worlds could be, so she didn't believe anything could truly come of such an encounter. However, even with her firm conviction, a doubt arose in her mind. Why had James McAllister watched her so intensely? And why, Even without wanting to, did she feel that there was something more at play here. As always, fate knew how to play its own games. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share it with your friends, leave a comment below, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this one. Sophia sat in the hotel's break room during a coffee break. The peaceful atmosphere contrasting with the inner turmoil she tried to hide. Her coworker, Isabel, approached with her usual kindness, and unknowingly, she touched on a part of Sophia's life that she kept hidden with great care. Between laughter and casual words, the conversation gradually shifted to something more personal. "You never talked much about your life before you came to work here," Isabel commented, as curious as always. Sophia hesitated for a moment, but the trust she had in Isabel made her decide to share a piece of her story. She explained that she came from a difficult childhood marked by poverty and violence. Her relationship with her parents was distant, and the memories of that time were too heavy to recall often. Gradually, she opened up, sharing how an abusive relationship had stolen part of her youth and left deep scars in her heart. Her life at the hotel, the daily work, and the small gestures of care for the guests were her escape, her way of rebuilding herself and forgetting what she had lived through. Sophia revealed, with a sad look, that she had always dreamed of studying psychology, but the reality of a simple job and the need to support herself kept her away from that goal. Life, with its challenges and impositions, had shaped her choices. Yet, hidden within her was a dream, one she feared she might never be able to realize. James, unknowingly, became increasingly intrigued by Sophia. It wasn't just her understated appearance or the mystery that surrounded her, but something deeper. He knew there was something in her that didn't fit, something he couldn't identify. After several days of observing her from a distance, a coincidence led him to discover a detail he would never have imagined. Sophia had, in fact, studied psychology. He learned this by chance, overhearing a conversation between her and another hotel employee, where her academic background was mentioned. James was surprised. Psychology? This woman, who spent her hours attending to the details of the hotel, so far from any intellectual appearance, didn't seem to fit the profile he would expect from someone with that background. This made him even more curious, and a spark of interest ignited within him. Who was she, really? What had made her abandon that path and become a maid? He couldn't stop thinking about the unseen layers of her personality. This discovery led James to start observing her with renewed attention. Her calm behavior and the silent way she worked began to make more sense to him, but at the same time, he found himself even more intrigued. There was complexity in Sophia, and he wanted to understand where this silent strength came from, behind that simple woman who seemed to be more than she appeared. As the days passed, James noticed that Sophia carried something deeper inside her that prevented her from getting close to anyone. She seemed distant, reserved, as if carrying a burden that made her cautious and closed off from new connections. James, almost imperceptibly, began to break down some of these barriers. But there was something deeper in Sophia, something she wasn't ready to reveal to anyone. On a quiet afternoon, during a brief conversation in the hallway, Sophia finally let slip a fraction of her greatest secret. She had been abandoned by a great love from her past, someone she believed to be her soulmate. This love, however, left her when she needed him the most, and the abandonment deeply wounded her. Since then, she had closed herself off from any possibility of giving herself to someone else, fearing the pain of rejection. James was surprised by the revelation, but at the same time, he felt an even deeper connection with her. It wasn't just the fact that he wanted to understand what made her so enigmatic, but there was a silent empathy growing within him. He didn't know exactly how he could help her, but he felt that something in her was about to change. Sophia, however, wasn't ready to let go of her defenses. She knew James was beginning to break down some of her barriers, but she remained cautious. The fear of reliving the same pains of the past was stronger than any attraction that might arise. She didn't know if she could give herself to him again, even though something deep inside her started to make her soul feel lighter in his presence. James McAllister was becoming increasingly intrigued by Sophia. What began as a simple curiosity gradually turned into something deeper. He began to notice nuances in her that attracted him, and unknowingly, his attention intensified. However, not everyone around him saw it the same way. Liam Thompson, his co-worker and longtime friend, soon noticed the change in James' behavior. He realized that the businessman's interest in Sophia could cause more complications than he had imagined. Liam, always concerned with image and status, feared that James' involvement with a maid could damage his facade of success. What could have been seen as a simple interest would turn into something uncomfortable and out of place, putting both of their images at risk. Liam then decided to act. With his persuasive manner, he approached James and, almost subtly, tried to discourage him. "You can't get involved with someone like that, James," he said, trying to mask his own insecurities under the guise of a loyal friendship. He knew that if James got too close to Sophia, it could weaken both of their positions at the hotel, especially his. With carefully chosen words, Liam began to manipulate James, feeding his insecurities and guiding his actions in a way that would maintain the appearance of success intact. He knew exactly how to keep his friend distant from Sophia, as he was aware that James' involvement with someone outside his circle of power and status could be dangerous. But what Liam didn't count on was that James, even while influenced, was starting to realize that something more was forming between him and Sophia, something that couldn't be easily controlled. Sophia, in turn, began to notice the change in James' behavior. He watched her more often, seemed more attentive, and his actions were no longer the same as before. Although this intrigued her, something inside Sophia made her hesitate. She saw in James, at first, a powerful and distant man, someone who played the game of appearances masterfully. She feared that behind his attention was just another rich and successful man, who would use his power and status to control the situation. When James tried to win her over with an expensive gift, Sophia didn't hesitate to reject the gesture. She knew what it meant, another attempt to gain her attention with material things, without truly understanding what she needed. The gift, though luxurious, didn't touch her heart. She needed something more genuine, something beyond appearances and wealth. She looked at James and saw a controlled, impersonal side that didn't align with her idea of true love. This pushed her further away. Sophia's resistance grew. She wanted to believe that James' interest in her wasn't just another attempt to dominate yet another situation or woman in his life. But as he continued to try to please her with grand gestures and presents, she became more distrustful. Sophia knew that, for her, love wasn't about luxury, but about authenticity. And when she looked at James, she couldn't find that authenticity. Confused and not fully understanding his own feelings, James made an impulsive move, guided by the idea that he could win Sophia over the same way he conquered other aspects of his life, with grand gestures and expensive gifts. He thought that by doing this, she would surrender to his charms. Without realizing that he was merely repeating a pattern of empty behavior. James didn't understand that true love couldn't be won through wealth or manipulation. What he was doing wasn't different from his business strategies. He was trying to buy Sophia's affection, without realizing that she wasn't moved by any of that. To her, he represented everything she distrusted in the world of powerful men: control, distance, and a constant pursuit of status. Sophia, who already carried the scars of a painful past, wasn't willing to give in to yet another attempt at manipulation. James' gift, his attempt to please her in such an impersonal way, only reinforced her belief that he was simply playing the game of appearances. She pulled away, even more firmly in her decision not to get involved with him, fearing that he was just another man willing to control the situation. James didn't understand, but he was beginning to learn the hard way that, to truly win someone over, he needed to show vulnerability, honesty, and the willingness to give himself genuinely. The tension between James and Sophia finally reached its breaking point. After an intense argument, in which thoughtless and misunderstood words were exchanged, Sophia made a decision that seemed inevitable. She felt she could no longer submit herself to a dynamic that made her feel empty, even when, beside James, the unspoken promises, superficial gestures, and attempts at control all made her realize that she could no longer continue down this path. She looked at her life and realized she couldn't stay in a relationship that made her feel like a pawn in a game. A pawn James was trying to manipulate without caring for her deeper feelings. The emotional pain she felt became unbearable, and the idea of continuing in this game of appearances was more than she could bear. Sophia deserved more, she knew that. She decided to take control of her life, to choose her own freedom, free from the constraints of a relationship that was never genuine. Resolutely, she decided to leave the hotel and move to another city in search of something more true that would make her feel whole again. Sophia said goodbye to the environment that had been her refuge, but in her mind no longer represented safety. She knew that the decision to leave everything behind wouldn't be easy, but she also knew it was the only way to heal and find a path to true happiness. With Sophia's departure, James found himself more alone than ever. Although his career was marked by success and recognition, something was missing. The solidity of his professional life could not fill the emotional void that had settled in his heart. The absence of Sophia was palpable, but he refused to admit that it was more than just a fleeting attraction. He tried to convince himself that he was better off without her, that she was just a distraction. But as time passed, the emptiness only grew. James looked at his life and saw a man surrounded by luxury and material possessions, but with a deep hole in his chest. The emotional disconnection he had ignored for so long now became impossible to overlook. He tried to fill this void with more work, more accomplishments, more status, but nothing seemed to work. What he felt for Sophia was something that couldn't be smothered by more professional achievements or material goods. He realized that he had lost something far more precious than he could have imagined, a true connection, something beyond his control or anything money could buy. The relentless pursuit of material success had driven him away from everything that truly mattered. He was starting to understand that what he had with Sophia was deeper than any other aspect of his life, and now, without her, he felt completely empty. After days of reflection, James finally recognized the gravity of the situation. He could no longer deny that his life was empty without Sophia's presence. He began to review his own journey, seeing how his pursuit of a brilliant career, his obsession with material success, and the need to maintain appearances had driven him away from everything that truly mattered: love, genuine connection, and honesty. He knew he needed to change, and the first thing he had to do was correct the mistake he made with Sophia. His lack of vulnerability and the arrogance with which he tried to win her over had destroyed the chance for something real between them. James realized that to change his life, he had to first correct this flaw, and that Sophia's forgiveness was something he couldn't earn with riches, but with humility and honesty. Driven by the awareness of his own mistakes and the urgency to regain what he had lost, James decided to go after Sophia. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to try. His journey in pursuit of success had been marked by external accomplishments, but now he knew that true success would come from inner transformation and the courage to confront his own feelings. James arrived in a new city, not knowing exactly what he was looking for, but with a certainty that drove him forward. He needed something new, something that would make him feel like he was doing the right thing. It was then that, by chance, he saw her. Sophia was there, in the same place where he had been searching for her, but now, in a completely different context. She seemed calm, more centered, and the glow of her independence was evident. The encounter was unexpected, and for a moment, both of them were silent. James, now more humble and introspective, didn't want to just show up and make another impression. He needed to be honest. He needed to be vulnerable. He slowly approached her, and without hesitation, he spoke about what had changed in his life. He explained how his relentless pursuit of control and success had pulled him away from what really mattered. He revealed to her how the coldness he had cultivated had become a barrier to a genuine life, a life of real connections. The shine of his material achievements had vanished in the emptiness he felt without her. Sophia looked at him attentively. It was clear that he was being sincere, but the pain of the past was still a shadow in her heart. Even so, she noticed something different in him. It wasn't just the James she had known before, but someone who seemed to have deconstructed himself and was finally willing to learn and grow. Over time, the reunion between James and Sophia became something deeper. In a quiet conversation, away from the distractions of the city, James shared his most intimate reflections. He spoke about the emptiness he felt before she left, how his life had been filled with empty achievements, and how he had finally begun to realize that true happiness wasn't in material success but in genuine connections with others. Sophia listened attentively. The resistance in her heart began to dissipate. She saw that James was no longer trying to manipulate her or win her over with grand gestures. He was being real, and that vulnerability touched something deep inside her. She had always known that human relationships were what truly mattered, that love and true happiness couldn't be bought. James finally seemed to understand this. The conversation was like a window opening to new possibilities. Sophia began to see James differently, no longer as the distant, calculating man, but as someone who was finally willing to confront his own flaws and seek something more meaningful. At first, she still had reservations, but James' sincerity touched her in a way she couldn't ignore. Despite the changes she saw in James, Sophia still carried a deep fear inside her. The fear of giving herself up again, of trusting someone, and once again being hurt. She knew that empty promises could be tempting, but they wouldn't make her go back. She was finally at a point in her life where she didn't want to continue searching for something that wasn't genuine. "I can't believe in empty promises," she said, with a firm voice, though her gaze still betrayed the pain she felt. "I fear being hurt again. I'm afraid to give myself up and see everything fall apart like last time." James felt the weight of her words, knowing he couldn't make promises he couldn't keep. But there was something in his heart, something real, that pushed him not to give up. He looked into Sophia's eyes, and with the sincerity of someone who had finally understood what really matters, he said, "I'm not here to make empty promises. I'm here to fight for us. For you, I just ask one thing. Don't run away. Don't run away this time. I know I can be the person you deserve." Sophia felt the strength of James' words. He was willing to open up, to be vulnerable, and, more than anything, he was ready to fight. The fear was still there, but the silent promise of change and growth brought a new hope, something she didn't know if she was ready to embrace, but that, little by little, she started to believe might be possible. The truth began to reveal itself to James in an unexpected but necessary way. After a series of internal confrontations and a growing desire to understand what had really happened to his life and his relationship with Sophia, James made a decision. He needed to face Liam. During a tense conversation, he discovered something he had never imagined. Liam, his longtime colleague, was more involved in sabotaging his connection with Sophia than he had thought. Liam, initially hesitant, eventually opened up. In a confessional tone, he revealed that he had always envied James' success. This envy led him to manipulate the situation, distancing James from Sophia with the sole goal of keeping his own position secure at work. He feared that James' happiness, a more balanced life, would threaten the status he had built. Liam didn't want to see James happy, let alone in a genuine relationship with Sophia, who seemed to be the only person capable of making James change. This revelation left James stunned. The sabotage, which he thought came from external sources, actually came from someone he trusted. This made him realize how blind he had been to the manipulations around him, but it also made him see the internal transformation he still needed to undergo. Liam's truth not only opened his eyes to his friend's deceit, but also showed him the power he had to change himself, while James began to understand the forces that were preventing him from moving forward. Sophia finally gathered the courage to reveal what had truly marked her. In an intimate moment, away from the pressures of the outside world, she shared with James the real reason behind her fear of giving herself up again: abandonment. She told him how, in her past, she had given herself to a love that eventually abandoned her. The pain of that moment became etched in her soul, and since then, she feared that by opening up to a new relationship, the story would repeat itself. The fear of being left again prevented her from trusting any promise, and she kept the scars of that experience to herself. James listened attentively, with a growing weight in his chest. He hadn't known how deeply Sophia's suffering ran, and suddenly, he felt deeply vulnerable as if he were the one now carrying the weight of her pain. He felt guilty for not recognizing this pain earlier, for not understanding what had really been at stake. With complete sincerity, he promised her that he would no longer be the distant and superficial man he had been before. He wasn't there to offer empty promises, but to learn how to truly love her. He wanted to be the person she deserved, someone who could deal with her fears and insecurities without judging her. He wanted to be the one who would help her overcome her fear of giving herself to love. The next moment was one of pure revelation. James, now with a deeper understanding of what Sophia had faced, felt a genuine urge to apologize. He approached her, eyes full of sincerity, and spoke about his own mistakes. He acknowledged how he had treated her in the past, how his thoughtless actions and arrogant behavior had hurt her, and how he had pushed her away with his selfishness. "Sophia, I was wrong," he said, with a soft, almost broken tone. "I didn't see you for who you really are. I didn't understand the weight you carried, and instead of being the man you deserved, I became someone cold and distant. For that, I am truly sorry, from the bottom of my heart." Sophia, touched by his words and the vulnerability he now showed, felt a wave of emotions she didn't know still existed inside her. She realized that maybe, just maybe, James had really changed. He wasn't trying to present himself as the perfect or superior man anymore. He was there, flaws exposed, willing to rebuild something real. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said, hesitantly, but with a softness in her voice that indicated openness. "But maybe, just maybe, you can be the person I've always been looking for. I can't promise anything, but I'm willing to try." James, with an open heart, felt that, finally, he was on the right path. He knew that forgiveness wouldn't come instantly, but that moment, that genuine exchange of words and feelings, meant that something real was beginning to take shape between them. Love, now, seemed like a true possibility, grounded in forgiveness and the willingness to start over honestly and without haste. After the difficult steps they took, James and Sophia began to build a new life. No longer as two distant and lost individuals, but as a genuine partnership. What started as a connection marked by distrust and fear had transformed into something deeper, more solid. They learned to trust each other, not based on empty promises, but on true actions and the sharing of their vulnerabilities. James, the successful businessman who had once been obsessed with profits and status, left behind the cold, distant life that defined him. He began to dedicate himself to something more meaningful, more human. With Sophia's support, he started investing in social projects, supporting causes that would make a real difference in people's lives, especially those like Sophia, who had been marginalized by society. He used his fortune to fund initiatives that promoted equality, education, and opportunities for those who needed it most. Sophia, in turn, became a constant source of inspiration and support, helping James find his higher purpose. With her life experience, she became a crucial partner in their shared journey of transformation. Together, they built a life that was no longer focused on external achievements, but on actions that truly mattered, helping, healing, and transforming. The transformation that began between James and Sophia extended to the world around them. Their love wasn't just something intimate, but reflected in concrete actions with great impact. They began working together to create something lasting, a legacy far greater than themselves. James, now motivated by something deeper than material success, dedicated his energy to creating opportunities for women in risky situations, founding an organization that offered support, education, and work to those who, due to life circumstances, had been left behind by society. Sophia, with her experience and sensitivity, became the driving force behind their mission for social change. Together, they founded the organization, turning their personal experiences and pains into opportunities for other women. What once seemed like a story of suffering was now translated into real action with lasting impact. They were no longer just loving. They were creating something that would help change lives and create a more just world. Their love became visible in what they did, in their collective effort to transform lives, not just their own. It was an active love, transcending itself, a love that brought change, growth, and hope. In the end, James and Sophia discovered that true happiness wasn't about accumulating wealth or success, but in the deep transformation they had experienced, not only in their own lives, but in the lives of those around them. What they had built together was based on something beyond the need to prove themselves or achieve, but on the mutual acceptance of who they were, with all the imperfections and scars they carried. Their love was no longer a story of superficial achievements or material conquests. It was, instead, a story of trust, overcoming, and, above all, acceptance. They had learned that the secret to true happiness was in loving each other genuinely, with all the mistakes and flaws that are inevitable in life, and using them as stepping stones for personal and shared growth. True happiness, then, wasn't an end in itself, but a continuous journey of learning, transformation, and deep connection. James and Sophia found this happiness in the simple fact of being together, not because they were perfect, but because they were willing to grow together, to build something real, based on love and respect. James and Sophia's story culminates in a journey of self-discovery, forgiveness, and transformation. They became, in fact, the architects of their own happiness, not through material possessions or external achievements, but through building a life with purpose, love, and change. The audience is left with a sense of hope, with the understanding that, no matter how difficult the circumstances, true love can overcome any obstacle, and true transformation begins within each of us. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share it with your friends, leave a comment below, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this one.